Hello and welcome to Politically Incorrect Knitters. My name is Ann Pinkava, joined as always by the lovely Deplorable Knitter. And today we are joined again by the lovely Famous Artist Birdy Rose.
Hi.
Hey, Birdie. Thanks for coming on again. We appreciate it. If you guys missed it, she was on about 8 episodes ago. So make sure you check it out because we're not going to talk much about her story today. We got other things to cover. So
yeah, we're busy women.
Exactly.
Got stuff to do.
Before we do that, Anne is going to tell you about our giveaways. Yay!
Yes, because this episode is, as always, sponsored by Chicken Lady Fiber Arts. You can check her out at chickenladyfiberarts.com, and with our promo code, you can get 20% off your order. That is PIK Flag Day 20, and you can get beautiful yarns like this. This is the Politically Incorrect Knitters colorway. It is beautiful, and there is it's burgundy and navy and mustard all together, and I absolutely adore it. I've been knitting it up just to show it off briefly. I know that we're not going to do much knitting today, but it is just stunning when you knit with it, and I've been enjoying it a lot. And also we're giving away a skein of this past week. The winner is designer Cheryl. So Cheryl, if you'd like to get into contact with me, I can send you your skein of yarn and copy of Odyssey Tale by Cody Schlegel.
Congratulations, Cheryl. And then if you want to be eligible for this, if you want to be eligible for this week's giveaway, Anne also has that. So show off our beautiful yarn.
That's right. This is another skein by Chicken Lady Fiber Arts. This is part of her band book colorway. It is in her Surima sock base. Here, I'll show it off. And this is called The Snowy Day, based on the children's book. Oops, here. It is blindingly white. There we go. You can see it a little bit better from this angle. But it is lovely and delicate and speckled. And just perfect. But anyways, you can again check this out on her website and enter our giveaway by commenting below. And again, it'll be this skein of yarn and another copy of Cody Schlegel's book.
Yep,
I have a fat stack of those, so those will be going out to everybody.
I have a big stack of them too. So yeah, you guys are getting that book. So make sure you enter by next Thursday, which is the 23rd, maybe, so that you are eligible. Okay. Comment on this post, comment on this video on YouTube or Rumble to be eligible to enter. So there you go. But yeah, so we had to have Birdie back on because, well, she's cool, but also because we wanted to talk about the new documentary that Matt Walsh put out and puberty blockers, and you've got some new stuff in your store, like that nice mug you've been drinking out of that I think you should show off.
And I'll show you my new design about the documentary as well. Did you see it?
I saw half of it. I have not finished it yet.
Okay.
I got to the portion about the tribe in Africa, and then I ran out of time.
That was one of my favorite bits as well, because I put on Twitter that Matt Walsh just published a video of these African tribes being transphobic as fuck, and not one trans rights activist has said a word about it. And then several people said to me, actually they're claiming that Matt Walsh went to Africa and found the only transphobic tribe on purpose to interview them. And I was like, that's such a reach. Don't worry about it. Here, I'll show you my new artwork. It took me a moment to find. It says, "Do chickens cry?" And then the little, the bit where you credit who said it, I wrote lunatic.
Yeah.
Because that was a pretty mad question.
It was. And these people, so the thing about Matt Walsh finding the only tribe that's transphobic and stuff, I really don't feel like he did that. He spoke with a lot of people and really tried to, from what I gathered from his documentary, he was really trying to ask these questions. He found a professor, some doctors, a surgeon that does trans surgeries, the gay senator or whomever that was that he interviewed. And the conversations he had with these people were nuts, and it had nothing to do with him. He was very measured and very polite. He just wanted an answer to a question.
Right. And I mean, of course, Matt Walsh has an opinion on this, but he was sitting there. He said his questions. He played it straight. He's like, no, you just tell me, like, you just give me the definition of this word. What is a woman? Just give me an answer. It's like, well, and then there were several people in the interviews to be like, oh, well, you're trying to get me to give an essentialist answer or this. He's like, I just want you to give me an answer. And there are people who are like, no, can't, shut down the interview. We're done. We're not talking. He's like, just give me the answer to the question. It's like I'm not looking for I'm not looking for this answer or that answer. I just want your answer. Just tell me.
But I think he's kind of special at what he does in terms of, like, he's really fucking good at sitting there and with a straight face, just asking these questions and not smarting off. That's what you Americans call it, isn't it? We call it mouthing off. You guys say smarting off or something like that. So not smart assing and being snappy and being like, aha, I caught you being mental and crazy. He just let them talk. And that is kind of genius in a way, because the more you let people like that talk, the weirder and weirder it gets. I mean, my fella, he said the same thing when people were cancelling us. That he had a lot of people private messaging him, trying to explain to him what was wrong with my beliefs, my standing by reality. And he said to me, the more they tried to explain to him, the less it made sense. And that's exactly what happened in this documentary.
Yeah, and I, unfortunately, I didn't get to finish it, but he's talking to the gender studies professor or whatever that person was, and
They're the
guy
worst.
made no sense. No sense, and he's teaching college courses.
Right, the guy who said that the truth is transphobic, and he's like, wait, hang on, what?
Yeah, no, it was bizarre. They're
the worst, a gender studies professor. So I had an experience once. I was at a party. This was before the COVID stuff. And I was talking to someone, I was talking to a friend, and all I said was, unfortunately for some people, and I said it, unfortunately, because some people don't like what lot they're given in life. So I said, unfortunately, if you're born male, you will always be a male. You can't change that. And this guy overheard me and shouted at me in the middle of this house party that I didn't know who he was. He went, I need to stop you there. You're wrong. And I was like, what am I wrong about? And he said, that is not true. I said, what? That if you're born male, you'll always be male. That's just not true. And I was like, so you're saying people can change their sex? That's not a thing. That's never happened. Nobody's ever changed their sex. So we got into this argument about it, and everybody else at the party was just like, when people stand up against a wall and they're like this, like trying not to make any eye contact with either of us. And but he wouldn't shut up. I couldn't get a word in, and he was just shouting at me. And then he said, I should know, because I am a gender studies professor and I teach gender studies at university. And then I just went, oh, here we go. One of them, like one of them. I'm not going to listen to you anymore. Like, I shouldn't have listened to him anyway, because he's talking nonsense. But it was interesting to me that people think that because they've studied gender, whatever that is, they can tell a woman like me that I'm wrong about what being a woman is. I don't know if there's other ideologies that you can teach in university that give you license to go around telling everybody that they're wrong about reality.
Right, and that they have no specific definition, that you could be a woman's study major, but you cannot say what the essential word woman means. And it's like, Shouldn't you though? Like that seems pretty basic that you can
Pretty
have.
vague. It's pretty vague. They say that it's anyone who identifies as one, anyone who feels like one. Well, what does a woman feel like then? Because I don't know what the feeling is that we've all got that unites us in knowing that we're women. As far as I've been concerned all my life, my womanhood is connected to my physical body. It's not up here, if that makes sense. But then trans rights activists use that argument of, oh, well, it is up here. It's all up here. It's nothing to do with your body. It's all in your mind.
Right. It's all in your mind. And yes, you must change your body immediately.
Yes.
Right.
And children as well, right? Children need to have their bodies changed before their minds even developed.
That's the part that was just killing me.
The pediatrician with blue hair, she obviously works with children.
Yeah, the minute I saw the woman with blue hair, I knew where she was going, and it was horrible. First off, my children will never see a pediatrician like that because I can read the signs. But it's scary that these people truly believe what they are telling you, and that I don't know what it's like in the UK, but here, I believe once my kids turn 12, that they that they try to have it so that I won't go into the doctor with them, so they can talk to them about things like, you know, sex and birth control and you know, maybe getting vaccines that I haven't approved. And it's just crazy to me that why would you put your kids even in that room with that person?
But
they don't have their best interests at heart.
I can see there are arguments, aren't there, that kids at a certain age, like for example, young girls, might want to talk about contraceptive pills without their parents around, or maybe something's going on at home, worst case scenario, something's going on at home and you need to be able to say something to your general doctor without your parents hearing it. But I also feel extremely uncomfortable about giving children that responsibility and allowing them to have these conversations with a doctor who might be a nutter, an ideological nutcase, without the parents knowing what's going on. So what would be the middle ground on that? I mean, because there are cases where a child might need to speak without the mum or dad, but the mum and dad need to know what's being said between the child and this adult. So they need to either be in the room or know or see all the paperwork afterwards on what's been said and what's being done. So either way, mum and dad know.
Yeah, I don't know. There's got to be something, but I feel like there's no reason that a 12-year-old girl or boy should be able to have. I mean, I think here they can even have an abortion without their parents knowing if they talk to the doctor about it. And I just, if I had a 12-year-old that was pregnant, I would want to know about that.
Yeah,
regardless
that
of
would
the
be
whole
nuts.
Abortion thing. My 12-year-old should not be having sex. I mean, I don't care what people say. They're still small children.
Right. So when you see, like, I don't know if it's the same in America, but here when you see a therapist, for example, there are certain things that they have to report to, for example, the authorities. So if you, even though you have patient confidentiality, if you admit to a crime, they still have to report knowing about the crime. Things like that. So with doctors, is there not a rule like that where if a 12-year-old needs an abortion, for example, how are these doctors not informing the parents?
I don't think they have to. And that's the I know we've gotten off on a tangent already. But that's the thing about these doctors. You've got to know who's coming in. As parents, we have to be so vigilant nowadays because they've all gone off the deep end. And if it, you know, we talk about like knowing what's going on in schools, but even we need to know who our doctors are and who our nurse practitioners are and the people that are going to be having contact with our kids, because they might be saying something to them. Like my kid that likes Peter Pan, like, oh, well, maybe you are Peter Pan. Like, no, just a kid.
It is a worry because, like, back in the day when I was growing up, you wouldn't care about what the doctor believes in because they know what the boundaries are in professionally, right? So they know that their professional boundary is that, for example, if I have a Buddhist doctor, he can't start telling me that I need to just pray to Buddha and chant every day, or that I need to try this Buddhism technique. They can't do that. They have to follow what doctors in the UK do, you know, like the science, the medicine, all that stuff. But now you've got this ideology where you don't know if that doctor is trying to push that ideology on your kid. And there's no other, like, as far as I'm aware, there's no other ideology or religion that you're allowed to do that with as a doctor or a teacher or a policeman or anything like that.
Well, also, it's the question of, like, you know, who can abuse children? Everybody. So, okay, so are you a parent? Are you worried about the kid has to talk to their doctor because their parent may be abusing them, but then the parent is worried because the doctor may be abusing them. And then, you know, it's like, oh, so your psychologist could be abusing you, or your mom could be abusing you, or everybody. So how do you have checks and balances in the system?
Well, like, ultimately, like, the responsibility of the kid comes down to the parent, doesn't it? Like, I don't like this narrative in schools that you've got going on where the teachers are saying these are my students. That makes me uncomfortable. Or they say they're my children. That makes me uncomfortable because they're not your children. All these children have got parents. They're not your children, and you don't get to cross any sort of boundaries with these kids because they're not yours, you know.
Yeah, it's something Ann and I have talked about before, that in the US, there's more schools that are going for universal pre-K, and they're starting the kids out at 3 years old. Why do they want your kids at 3 years old every day, all day? Because it's easier to indoctrinate them the smaller they are. And that's the goal. Yeah. Oh, no, my kids, when they were 3, they went to preschool 2 days a week for like 2 hours because we just wanted them to be able to, like, play with other kids, like, you know, and follow directions from someone that wasn't us, but to do it because I couldn't ever do it. But
I don't know if I agree with it as well, because I think little children obviously they need to learn to socialize and things like that. But I think sitting in a school environment and being taught to work and do as you're told and don't question anything, I don't like that. I don't think kids should be taught that from 3 years old.
No. And I think most people don't agree with it. And we had the Head Start program here, which was, I think Ann was part of it, you said, but
it was not good.
Early, right?
Right.
You start at like 4 or 5 or whatever, and you go to school, and the Head Start kids would do well for a while, but then after a couple of years, they found that they were all still at the same level. Like, the kids might have had a better deal early, but then as time went on, they were just, not that Ann isn't special, but
well, I'm special too. I'm special too. I started school when I was 3, but only because I'm deaf. So I was born with rubella syndrome and I'm deaf, and I relied on sign language. So I started school at 3 and I went to school pretty much every day, I think it was. And I learned my sign language. But when I learned sign language, I learned to read with it. So I learned to read, and I think it was reading, talking, signing. It was a program. It was an actual thing that was doled out in the early 90s, and a whole bunch of kids got it. I got it, and there's a whole thing about that I'll come back to later. But I got given this program, and it was brilliant because I learned to sign, I learned to communicate, but I also learned to read because of it, and I learned to write quite early as well. So my reading and writing skills are quite good for someone who's deaf. A lot of deaf people, they struggle with the writing because when you sign something, it's a different thing to when you write it. So sometimes when they write their sentences, that a word will be in the wrong place, but because the way I see it, that's because when you sign it, it would have been like that, if that makes sense. So I hope I've explained that well enough. But yeah, I started school early, and I don't think it made me an advanced student. But then again, I started school early for a different reason. So,
right.
That you had, you know, it's more difficult to communicate when you're deaf. So making sure that you get the communication down early, you know,
I honestly think that program should come back. From what I hear, they don't. From what I hear, get it. But from what I hear, they don't do so much of that anymore. That's not available to a lot of kids due to lack of funding. So But I think it was great for me because it meant by the time I got into classes with normal kids, I could communicate effectively. I mean, I could anyway because my hearing wasn't as severe when I was little as it is now. It was severe enough to rely on sign language, but that was partly because I couldn't talk either because I had something wrong with my throat. And then that's a whole other story in itself. I'm trying not to derail this.
That's all right. I already did. But yeah, so anyway, the documentary really opened my eyes to just even the people that you're, not just teachers and things, but man, we have to be vigilant about everybody that we're giving access to our children about, because they have an agenda. There's a big agenda that they all have. And
it's so disgusting though. It's disgusting. I can't imagine having an agenda with other people's kids. I mean, I don't have children, but I do have nieces and nephews that I look after, and I never put my opinions on them. It's just not a thing. I couldn't imagine sitting down with my 5-year-old nephew and talking to him about this shit. All we talk about is like, I don't know what we talk about, the Hot Wheels and Paw Patrol, shit like that.
Well, that's a general normal conversation with a 5-year-old, whatever show they're into and whatever toy they like. I mean,
yes,
that's normal. And for people to be like, I had no idea about the roots of where all of this stuff came from either. The people who pushed it, the guy who did the experiments on the twins and
Dr. Money,
and the guy who said that they have that babies are sexual, like, dude, they're disgusting people. And the fact that a whole generation is pushing the stuff that they did that was disproven is insane to me. And I don't know how they're justifying it. Like, is this, I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that you have these very, very dark, deviant people, like with the money study, to just give a little overview for those who don't know, that it was 2 twin boys. And one of the boys, it was a botched circumcision. So this guy, Dr. Money, convinced the parents to raise one as a girl and then the other as a boy, and that was the basis of his study. And they just horrible things. The boy raised as a girl, born Bruce, I don't remember, whatever, he went back, he transitioned back to a man, then he was David then.
Yeah, because he wasn't even told that he was born a boy and that he is a boy. He wasn't told, and he struggled with it his whole life because he didn't like the girly stuff. Mm-hmm. And
he wasn't allowed to do the boy stuff, which he wanted to do, which is crazy.
Right, that's even worse.
Right. And also, I mean, as part, this guy who's like, oh yeah, I'm just like, I am what is good for your children. And yeah, had them stimulate sex acts on each other as children. And both of them died. One of them overdosed and the other one committed suicide. Right.
They both really struggled with it. And I imagine it affected the whole family. Right. I mean, the interesting thing is, I might have got this wrong, so I'll check afterwards, but I think it was Dr. Money as well, who before he did this, he came up with the idea of what we now call transabled, where people feel like they should have been born disabled, so they'll have amputations of body parts and stuff. And he was very supportive of this. And I think he came up with this whole thing for it. And I think there was a few amputations were made in the UK. And I think it was Scotland Yard that banned it, put a stop to it. And then a few years later, he comes up with this idea of, oh, well, people were just born the wrong sex.
It's crazy. And in the documentary that Matt Walsh did, he asked a psychologist or something about people that felt they were transabled, and the person said that those people have a mental disorder. And it's
she was like really she was really offensive about it in their terms. So she said something like, oh, don't be so stupid. That is just somebody with an infatuation and a delusion, and we should not be pandering to it. And I was thinking, but when we say that about transgender, you lot all scream to high heaven about how transphobic we're being, but you're not going to give this the time of day. And this is the same thing as far as I'm concerned.
Right. It's exactly the same, except that okay, so if you're transabled and you have an amputation, yes, that will affect you for the rest of your life. But they're wholeheartedly affecting our children for the rest of their lives. And I heard one of them say, oh, we can just restart the puberty at any time if they choose to not transition. And that's so not the case. And it's just lies upon lies. And I don't even know how, like, medical professionals, this was a medical professional saying it, who believes that. How can you believe
I don't
that?
know. I don't think they believe it. I think what a lot of people are doing is they're placing their bet on who they think is going to win. And also, I think a lot of medical professionals, either they have an ideological allegiance to this and they're going to stick to it whether it's right or wrong. And some of them might be seeing it as a career boost, like a financial gain.
That's true. Well, I would say a couple of the like the pediatrician that you talked about, it was very interesting to me that the less that you can have real concrete answers, the more flowery the language is. Like the thing that you had the art piece of, do chickens cry? You know, it's like, oh, so we're going to, it's the more softer and the more emotional the language is and the less concrete answers. And the more upset they are when you ask for concrete answers. I'm sorry, we're not talking about facts of biology. We're talking more flowery language, more, how do you feel? Well, if you feel this way, if you feel that way. Okay, specifically, what is the woman feeling? That's too much for me. I can't define how to feel like a woman. But I can ask you questions like, well, I just have to affirm in whatever you believe and whatever you think, accept that. But you know, how a child is feeling, and the care starts when the child feels like it. And yeah, it is terrifying, because these are, you know, there was another woman who was very concrete, this is the issue, what's going on. She didn't use flowery language. She didn't have to use flowery language. She was straight up, she was straightforward. She could define her terms. You know, these are facts, here we go. She didn't need to sit here and go into, you know, talks about chickens. Like it was a very, I don't know, it was bizarre. And kind of in that vein, that, you know, you have straightforward definition of woman is that biologically, you know, men have a penis, women have a vagina. Congratulations, we have an answer. But in talking with the tribe in Africa, they also had a biological answer, but the thing right after it was, what is a man's responsibility? What does a man do in his community? What does a woman do in her community? How does, you know, that they're very like, okay, this is your biology and this is how your biology behaves in society. Whereas the sort of you know, you have different transgender activists and people on the street who couldn't define what a woman is, but they'd be like, oh, well, a woman is when you like to feel pretty. It's like, that's really awful. Has almost nothing to do. I mean, it has something to do with being a woman, but that's not being a woman in its essential form. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting, because what you're talking about there is sort of like stereotypes of expectations and roles in societies, which do have variations around the world.
Right.
So some women, and you'll see in some parts of the world, the women are the leaders of the tribe. And then in other parts of the world, men are the leaders of the tribe and they get the final say. Does that make sense? So, and the way that masculinity and femininity is perceived varies around the world as well. But there are consistence, and the consistency is with the biology and the reality of the differences between men and women.
That's true. And, you know, I think some people get confused because, you know, boys don't have to all like trucks. but that doesn't make
No.
them less of a boy. And I think that that's where people start to get confused. Guys can like to feel pretty. My husband personally, if I told him he looked pretty, would probably like flick me because he'd be like, stop it. Because he doesn't, but you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
just
I
because
know what you
as a
mean.
man you feel these things doesn't mean that
Well, you're talking about
you're less of a
emotions there.
man.
And then
Yeah.
people get mixed up with preferences and personality traits as well. So like I've got 4 younger brothers, and when we were kids, they used to have actual, like real full on, no holding back fist fights, like jumping off the sofa, kicking each other to play with my Barbies. Just fighting over who gets to play with my Barbies. And there's never been confusion on whether or not they're girls. None of them are girls. They're all boys that were fighting pretty much to the death to get one of my toys.
But that's the difference there, is that somebody who's messed up and thinks that this is real is going to look at that and say, oh, well, they think they're girls. Well, no,
100%.
no.
100%. If that was today, I think my parents would have had a lot of pressure on them to potentially transition all 4 of my brothers because they all wanted my toys, and maybe transition me as well because I wanted their toys. I wanted the train set and I wanted the cars, and I think I wanted it because I wasn't necessarily allowed it. Like I grew up in, like, my mum was a punk, but my dad who brought me up, he was Irish Catholic, so he was quite old school on like the roles. And because I was the only girl, they really wanted me to really fulfill that female role in the family and actually be girly. And I think it was my mum as well, even though she was a punk, she really wanted like this little girl best friend, go out shopping, do makeup and shit like that. And she didn't get that from me because I wanted to play football and climb a tree. No, I could never get out of the tree though because I'm scared of heights. I only climbed it to impress the boys. I'm like a cat.
And then the fire department had to come get you.
Yeah, last week.
So do you guys celebrate Pride Month in the UK?
It is currently Pride Month at the moment. A whole
Okay.
month of all these ugly fucking flags everywhere, in every shop, on every shop window, on every corner, everywhere you go, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
The most
It is here.
oppressed. Yeah, I could say the most oppressed, marginalized people in the whole world have every organization supporting them.
Yeah, no, it's totally messed up. I just wasn't sure if that was a US thing or if it was broader than it being here.
Oh, we definitely copy you guys. Everything you do,
good.
we do it as well.
The holy month of Pride goes across borders.
Oh my
I've got a
God.
new sticker. Actually, I've got a new sticker for Pride Month. It says, "No one is born in the wrong body," and I put all the lovely colours on it.
Oh.
That's very nice.
Thank you very much. I'm going to put those around later on. Going to go and hit the town.
Oh my, I bet you that people are going to love that.
I'm sure they will.
I've seen other people do that with stickers too, like Posey Parker, and like police are called. Like, if you see these transphobic stickers, like,
yeah, well, I've got quite a few people locally that get my stickers and they put them around as well. And when my stickers first went up, the local art community, basically people going after me, they made a big deal about it on Facebook, telling everyone to call the police, that they were saying things like, I can't believe she hasn't been prosecuted yet. And, you know, I feel sorry for trans people who can't leave their house because they have to see stickers like this. And I was like, if you're an adult, you're grown up, and you can't leave your house because there might be a sticker outside that doesn't obey your religion, you're mental. You need help. Nothing to do with me. Don't call the police on me.
Right. If you're offended by a sticker, then that's messed up. And also, I don't know if the news made it to you or not, but during a Pride festival that was advertised as all ages, the singer Christina Aguilera performed on stage with a strap-on.
Oh God, in that fucking ugly suit,
that green
blue.
Hulk costume.
Oh,
It was horrible.
I mean, the strap-on was bad enough, but everything else made it worse.
But that event was advertised as a family-friendly event. And if I was at, first off, I would never take my kids to Pride, but if I was at an event that was advertised as family-friendly and that came out, I would be appalled and offended, and nobody is saying anything about it. And I think a lot of this to the core is the sexualization of kids.
Of course it is, and they are coming after your kids. And I think people, if you'd have said that 5 years ago, even, people would have said that you're a conspiracy theorist. I mean, I got called a conspiracy theorist when I was talking about this, and but we're now starting to see that some of these people actually are coming for your kids. And I say some because I think there are a lot of people involved in this that are activists and are championing this, who are just too fucking ignorant to notice that this is quite insidious and that there are people involved in this who are going for your kids.
Well, yeah,
Right.
and imagine, I mean, and we see this all the time, but you are a good liberal parent, okay? You're out there, you know, you may be in a heterosexual relationship, but you make sure that kids know that, you know, some people have two mommies and some people have two daddies, or, you know, three daddies, or, you know, two moms and three dads, or whatever it is. And you're like, okay, kids, I want you to know that some people are different, and, you know, that's okay. So I'm going to take you to a Pride event so you can see people of all different sexual orientations and backgrounds. And so you could know it's okay. And then you show up and Christina Aguilera has a strap on and you're like, well, that's okay too, kids. And, you know, there's little Johnny and he's terrified.
No, that there's that thing as well. You've got the Pride events being sexualized, and then you've got the whole drag queen for kids thing.
Right.
And I think it was Blair White. Do you listen to Blair White?
I don't.
Oh, I'll send you some videos. Maybe some people in your audience will know who Blair White is, but Blair White is a transsexual, so a man who identifies as a woman. And I don't think he'll care that I said a man, because he's not mental. He's fully on board with reality. But Blair White said, you can teach your kids to be tolerant and be kind, and to understand that some people live differently and all that, without taking them to a drag show or taking them to a show where people are wearing penises, wearing strap-ons and sexualizing your kids. You don't need to sexualize your kids and put them through that to teach them to be nice. That's not a thing.
Right. And, you know, our viewers know that I'm a Christian, and so I believe the Bible, and it's come up. One of my kids, when they were 4, said to me, you know, some kids have two moms. And I said, yes, some kids do have two moms. I said, but, you know, the Bible doesn't support that. I didn't say that kid is bad, those people are evil. I just said what we believe in our house is what the Bible says, and the Bible doesn't agree with that. And they said, oh, okay. And then they moved on, because that's what they needed to know. Yep, some people do have two moms. I don't need to take them to a drag queen story hour for them to know about it. And the libraries are one of the worst things here, but my kids do a makerspace, which is they do the STEM activities at the library, and they do different experiments and things. And they're not going this month because they were going to be Pride themed. And there's no reason that my kids going to the library to do science, technology, engineering, and math should have anything to do with Pride in it. I don't even understand how those two correlate.
I don't understand why Pride has got anything to do with kids anyway, because let's take Pride events in its traditional form. It was about sexuality. What has sexuality got to do with children? Nothing. And then you add it in now that it seems to be all about the trans stuff. Well, what has that got to do with children? Nothing. Absolutely nothing to do with children. So I personally wouldn't take kids to Pride. I just wouldn't. And it's also because I know it's going to be sexualized.
Right. There was someone in Michigan saying that there ought to be a drag queen in every school. And I'm sitting there and I'm, you know, they just make everything better. And I don't know, like Al Gore, when Al Gore
oh God,
president.
sorry.
That's okay. Don't worry about it. When Al Gore was campaigning for president, he said a chicken in every pot for teachers. That's a long stretch. That is a long, it's like, oh, that, teachers they're all going to get pay raises. Isn't that going to be great? That's his campaign slogan. And then there's like, no. What we really need now is drag queens. Every school, drag queens.
What is the push for drag queens? I don't understand it, because like, I don't know if you have pantomime where you are, but when I was growing up, there's pantomime, and it was more sort of like a Christmas time thing, and it was meant to be sort of like fun, sort of a laugh, it's a joke, and there's always like a Cinderella or something like that, and there's always a man being a fairy godmother or something. And that is entertaining, and it was actually family friendly. There wasn't anything sexualized in it. It wasn't about drag. Pantomime's a thing in itself. So that is, people think that that's what it is when they think drag queen story time. They don't think that it's going to be sexualized. I think a lot of people are being ignorant about it. And then when you tell them it's sexualized, because they've already sent their kid to it, they're going to double down on it and protect what they've just done to justify it. I don't know. Is it the same in America, where if you speak out against drag queen story hour, you're accused of being like a prude, a conservative, Republican, maybe? Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
so
you're
they're
racist
by default.
supporter, and you're like, that has nothing to do with it.
So does that mean that if you're on the left, that you're advocating for sexualizing children? If being on the right means you don't want kids to be sexualized?
I saw the Babylon Bee the other day, and it was conservative lawmakers, push for regular strip clubs. It's like just naked women and just adults there. That's all we're asking. And it's like that is the realm of concern.
I'm so glad I wasn't exposed to shit like that when I was a kid, because I think it would have really put a lot on me that I wouldn't have needed. I think it probably stresses kids out. I don't know how kids feel about it, because I don't know any kids that go to drag queen. If my nieces and nephews went to something like that, I'd definitely be talking to their mum and dad. I'd be like, no. Look at all these videos. Look at Lips of TikTok. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
And if you open up the Disney Plus app, the first thing that it was, watching something this week, and it was, this is a show, and then the little introduction is, surviving fourth grade and exploring your sexuality in the banner. I'm like,
surviving fourth grade?
Right. And it was just sitting there like, what is this?
Just the language of that alone, surviving, like as if every year of your life is a battle for survival in the Western world. For the most part, that is not most of us.
Right.
I don't know. I just don't understand how they don't see that this is not appropriate stuff for kids. I have a kid that's fourth grade age, and they still are playing pretend. They still have nothing to do with anything. And anybody who tells you that kids are innately sexual or innately, they need their parents to guide them. They need their parents to say, this is appropriate, this is not appropriate. Kids crave boundaries. And by just opening them up to everything, you're just confusing them more. So I posted a meme on Instagram, and it's a picture of a family, a stick figure family, and the parents are holding an umbrella over their kids, and the rainbow's falling down on it, right?
I've seen that.
And people were like, well, first they were like, oh, that's bigoted and whatever. But somebody was like, oh, so you're protecting your kids against pride, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, one of my kids is a cat, one of my kids is Peter Pan. Like, let's move on. Like they have no idea about any of this. And then the person just kept going after me. And they said something like, oh, well, what do you do to protect your kids against bullies and school shooters and blah, blah, blah. And I said, I homeschool them. And then the person blocked me, because they have it in their mind that like, you have to buy into this. And if you're not buying into it, and you're just the worst person that could be. No, my job is to protect my kids. I am doing that by not putting them in school, by not exposing them to things that are not age appropriate. Like, what happened to that? When I was a kid, there were things that were like, okay, this is for little kids, this is for bigger kids. Oh, and then this stuff is for big kids. Like, it's not rocket science. I just don't understand how they can do it.
Well, and also, I mean, in sort of old-fashioned puberty talks, what did you say? This is what's happening. Your body is changing, and that's okay. Everybody goes through this. And now it's like, oh, well, your body is changing. And that might mean, and you know, being uncomfortable with your body, you're not just saying like, oh, well, being uncomfortable with your body is, you know, everybody has that. It's extremely common. It's no, in fact, your body might be wrong.
Yeah, you might be in the wrong body.
Mm-hmm.
How confusing is that? And I think if I was a teenager and somebody told me that I was in the wrong body, I would have believed them. I think I would have, because it's such a confusing time, isn't it, for everybody being a teenager? It's so weird. And it is a weird time. It's very strange because you're not an adult yet. But I think I read that when you turn 14, your brain begins to develop the ability to form abstract thoughts. And I think that's why a lot of people go through a stage of listening to like songs and feeling it really deeply and being like really philosophical and feeling like everything is magnified in meaning, because you've just developed this way of thinking. And to chuck some shit like this in there and say that you're born in the wrong body. Also, you've got the peer pressure of it. So I've spoken to some of my friends, teenagers, and some of them have told me that they are non-binary or they identify as a they, them, because if they don't, they're the odd one out at school. And being just a cisgender straight boy or girl isn't good enough. You're actually looked down upon in school if you identify that way. So you have to identify into this ideology. But by saying that you're non-binary, it's the easiest way to just get away with still being yourself and not having to make major changes and not having any pressure on you to do certain things.
That's insane. And if anybody, dude, when I was an early, I was as tall as I am now when I was like 12 or 13. I was growing, I was changing into a female. If somebody was like, yeah, you might feel uncomfortable, I felt uncomfortable in my body. I vividly remember those years where like I wouldn't wear shorts because I was so self-conscious about like how my legs looked, and like it's normal. And instead of like telling your kids, yeah, it's normal, you might feel weird, you might feel awkward, things are going to start happening and you're going to be like, what the heck? And that's okay. No, instead we're
telling them they're in the wrong body, and then we're sexualizing them as well. The last thing I wanted when I was a teenager was to be sexualized in any sort of way. Like, my mum used to be very sort of, she wanted me to be a girly girl and to wear like tight clothes and short skirts, and if you've got it, flaunt it, she used to say to me. And I hated it. I hated that because I was like you, I was very tall. So when I was like 9 years old, people thought I was like 14. So I've always been very tall. And I think being very tall is a thing in itself, because a tall woman, like I've always been a tall woman, I've always been very self-conscious of my height as well. So because I'm towering above all the boys in school as well. So yeah, it brings on another level of being self-conscious, I think. Maybe, I mean, maybe some other tall women in the audience can let us know if they felt the same way.
Oh, me definitely, to be part of the audience. But yeah, that it's very, and it is sort of the self-conscious thing of, hello, men folk, and they're all like this high.
Yeah, and sixth grade, they were all like,
yeah.
It's awkward, and the whole thing is awkward, and I don't know why. I mean, okay, I admit that in my life I didn't get the best sex ed, and it could have been better. I went to a private Christian school, and so therefore our thing was like, God says don't have sex until you're married,
which isn't great, not great advice.
And right, I mean,
because God can say that, but did God know a lot of teenagers when he said that?
He probably knew what we were going to do.
I think he knew a lot of teenagers, but still, you should have more explanation.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
best practices.
So, like, I'm not against educating our children about like what's going to happen to them, and because honestly, he had a bunch. We had a 7th and 8th grade class of girls, and it was our male Spanish teacher that was like, girls, don't do anything that God says is bad. And we're like, okay. Like, so that wasn't ideal, but also like, it doesn't have to be what we're doing now either. Like, there should be a nice happy middle where it's like, hey, things are going to happen. Here's like birth, like how, you know what I mean?
I think there should be a middle ground, and it should be age appropriate, and there should be an opt-in or opt-out option where the parents can say, I don't want my kid in this class till next year, or something like that, because usually the parents know the kid better than the teacher in some ways. Like, you will know whether that's appropriate for your kid. So you could say, I don't want them doing sex ed until next year. That would be great, wouldn't it?
It would be. And you're right. Parents do know their kids better. I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. Honestly, my 6-year-old is probably going to be more prepared to learn about that stuff than the 9-year-old. 9-year-olds got their head in their clouds. They are just doing their own thing. I will be talking to them and they just don't even have a clue. They're just la, la, la. And I know that about them. And so when I'm homeschooling and stuff, I know that I have to deal with them differently than I have to deal with their younger sibling. But society doesn't want parents to parent. It goes back to the thing. They want the schools to be telling you what's going on, and they want, it's ridiculous. Anyway, I'm a little ranty today, sorry.
I'm the same way. I'm so glad I don't have kids, but like, I couldn't imagine anything worse than having to have that conversation. Like, I think if any of my nieces and nephews ever ask me anything like that, I think I might just go, be like, no, this isn't for me. Like, go to your mum and dad for that. I couldn't imagine anything worse.
But you know, I think part of it is that kids need to have a safe space. They need to have
Of course
people
they
that they
do.
can talk to. And unfortunately, if you're the favorite aunt or whatever, it might be you, you know?
No, it ain't me. Please. I'd be so rubbish at it.
But yeah, the whole thing. And then the kids can change and stop puberty. That's the biggest.
It's not true. You can't stop puberty and then just resume it. What you're doing is you're disrupting a child's development. And I don't know if you saw the bit in the documentary where Matt Walsh talks about, I think it was Abigail Schreier's book, where she says about how the Lupron, the one that's used as a puberty blocker, was initially used to chemically castrate paedophiles. So then we're going back to the weirdos and the pedos again, aren't we, in this story? Like, it's
right. And
like,
also,
and when I've been saying that actually online, I've been saying to people, so what you're telling me is that we should chemically castrate children just like we did to paedophile. People get so upset when I say that to them, but thing is, this is the same drug. So you're telling me that if I don't approve of this, I'm bigoted and I'm wrong and I should be arrested or something, because I don't think children should be given the drug that we castrated paedophiles with.
Right. And the watery, emotional woman is all like, oh, well, you can't say this drug is used for this. Why is it used over here? Again, there's space for her to give like an explanation. She could have said dosage difference and used with other drugs. She could have explained that. She could have, if there is such a difference, she could have just said, but she didn't. She said, you cannot say that. That is harmful language. That cannot be said. The interview is done now. Well,
yeah, the policing of language is a way of policing, a way of deterring people from talking about it. So people can get away with whatever they want as long as they can stop people from objecting to it.
Right.
Yeah. It's 1984 come to life. The Ministry of Truth.
I never finished that book. The 1984 book. I started reading it probably about 4 years ago that was about the time that I'd clocked on to what was going on and I was getting cancelled, and I started reading 1984 and I had to stop. It was blowing my mind and I was just like reading the book and I was ranting at it. I'll go, but that's what's happening now with this thing. And then I was like, I can't read this book. It's stressing me out. It's stressful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bummer of an ending too, not to spoil it.
Yeah, no, I listened to it as an audiobook. So like, even though I was like really angry at it, it just kept going and I never stopped it. And I'm like, oh my God, like what is happening here? Oh man. And I know everybody uses the 1984 example, but it's amazing how it's like a playbook for what's happening. Okay, so this word doesn't mean this anymore. So let's change it. And I was looking up the definition of something the other day. I don't remember what it was, but I was just dying for a physical dictionary because what I was finding online I knew was wrong, but I don't have a dictionary in my house and I couldn't like get the real definition and it was making me insane. But that's what they're doing. Everybody relies on the internet. Nobody has a real, okay.
Yeah,
some people have
so
real
like
dictionaries, but yeah.
on the internet, everything can be like, in theory, everything can be bought by a company and all the definitions can be changed on Google. It's not like before we had the internet, when you had physical dictionaries, it's not like the government will physically confiscate all the dictionaries and then replace them with new ones and new meanings.
Well,
I mean, they probably could, but they didn't.
The
Right,
Soviet era thing, where if you had your encyclopedia and they would send you new definitions and you had to cut it out and you had to paste over.
Right, it's that, but internet.
Exactly. It's much easier
Yeah.
with internet.
Yeah, it's happening because I wish I could remember what I was looking up because I know what it means, but I just wanted to see what they were saying about it, and it was insane. Man, that's gonna bug me. But
I think the interesting thing about the kids, because I've never understood why kids need to go on puberty blockers and hormones and potentially on the pathway to surgery and being a medical patient for life. So that's a good way of cashing in on kids as well. I've never understood why kids have to do all of that, but there are grown men saying that they're women and they don't have to change anything about themselves. They just are women. So if that is true, if you just are what you say you are and you don't have to do anything, why do kids have to do this?
Well,
That's weird.
a good point.
it is. And so much of it too is, stuff like that, obvious, logical, like the kids have to go on puberty blockers. The adult man doesn't. That being a woman is a feeling, but the feeling that you must immediately medically affirm. And again, it's the very emotional language, and it's like, you can't look at the answer. You're not allowed to have a definite answer. You're not allowed to have a single answer. And you can't look at it straight. And again, Matt Walsh is in, he's asking questions. He's like, okay, just tell me what a woman is. And no, you're bigoted. You're looking for this answer and this answer is wrong. Well, then give me your answer. No, that we can't, like, your entire study is gender studies. So could you just give me an answer to the basic precept of gender studies, which should be, what is a woman, what is a man?
But the thing is, people don't really know what gender is either, because I've come across so many different justifications for what gender is, and none of them are a solid definition. So some people say it's the masculine and feminine. Some people say it roles and stereotypes. Some people say it's personality traits and your character. And then you've got trans activists who will say that is your sex. It just is. Or that it's different to your sex, but it's more important than sex because sex is irrelevant anyway.
Right.
So nobody's coherent on it. So I don't really like to talk about gender because I don't think it's really a thing. I think we've got other words like personality types. Did I show you this as well? In England, we've got a shop called Morrison's. I think it's kind of like Walmart. And this is what they've put up for Pride Month. It's a baby grow with the ugly flag on it.
Yeah, I know that Target store here had a whole Pride collection for kids, and just the way that people, my husband says it all the time, that they're sheeple. They're just people that are going along with the crowd because that's what everybody's doing. And everybody's like, oh, did you see all the stuff at Target? It's so great. No, we need to start saying no. Like,
I put it online and I called it sexual propaganda. And on Twitter, interestingly, on Facebook, I got a lot of good feedback. A lot of people were like, whoa, what's happening? And on Twitter, I had a lot of activists coming at me saying that there's something wrong with me because I'm sexualizing it by calling it sexual propaganda. But the way I see it is that is a sexual flag.
Yeah,
it's about sexuality.
Is about sexuality. That's
so
the point.
Why does it need to be on a baby?
Mhm.
And also, babies can't, like, I don't, with my artwork, I put my opinions out there, and some of it may be considered political, some of it isn't. And I can't imagine putting, for example, female to the bone. It's pretty harmless, but I still can't imagine putting that on a baby grow, because I just don't think it's appropriate to put things that have a political connotation on baby clothes or children's clothes, because they don't have an opinion on it yet. Do you know what it reminds me of? The Westboro Baptist Church thing.
Oh,
when
yeah.
I can't remember her name, the lady that left the church and then spoke out. And she said that she was holding these signs up when she was like 5 years old and didn't know what it meant. Does that make sense? And that, I think that has an impact on people when you're given a political agenda as a kid that isn't your idea, it's your parents or somebody else's thing, and you're forced to wear it and promote it. That's not good. I don't like that sort of thing. It makes me uncomfortable. I just thought I'd show that to you guys, see what you think.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I was a huge Trump supporter, but I never like made my kids hats that said it or anything. And I mean, they understand my politics and we talk about things, but I try to talk to them about it in a way that's age appropriate. And like, I never say, Democrats are evil, or
Yeah.
I say things like, we don't agree with what they think, because
well, that's because, like, it's okay for your kids to know who you are. Right.
But the closest I come to that is that my dog has a Trump dog collar, but I'm not genuinely saying that my dog loves Donald Trump. Sometimes it's like, someone said, it's like, you need to get a new dog collar. It says Trump Pence, that's over with. And I'm like, shh, she doesn't know. Let her live in that.
I think it's different. I think it's different with kids, though, to be honest, because
definitely.
Like, I don't know. I think because a lot of people said to me the reason the shops are doing that is to cash in. But then I had somebody else say to me that those baby grows are not selling too well. And so I'm wondering if there's a bigger agenda here, no pun intended, but I'm wondering if there's a bigger intention behind promoting this. I've got a lot of ideas, but, I can never stick to one.
Right. Well, I thought it was interesting. So the town I work in is fairly liberal for South Dakota. And I think I mentioned last week or the week before that they had the trans flags down the road, that the intersectionality. And first off, being so liberal, you think they could recycle their regular old pride flags from last year, but no, they new flags with new stripes. And I thought it was, okay, so again, Platinum Jubilee, people were like, oh, it's like Nazi Germany with all these Union Jacks around. The Union Jack is for everybody. The pride flag is a certain ideological agenda that you must affirm or people will attack you. It's like, if you're just like, this is my country's flag, go us. It's like, who cares?
Yeah, there was a lot of that here. Like, a lot of people seemed quite upset about Jubilee and flags up, and they're on my street even, there's still lots of bunting across the street, and some of it has the Union Jack on it, some of it doesn't, some of it's just red, white and blue bunting. And I think I'm the only person I know that feels happy when I walk down the street and there's bunting everywhere, and it just makes me happy. I'm like, oh, it's a lovely sunny day and there's bunting and there's Union Jacks, and I thought it was quite a nice thing, and I think it made me feel quite at home. And I don't think there's a lot of other places where people are disgruntled by their own flag being flown. But
A lot
we
of
seem
people
to
are
be
here.
in Britain, people seem to be quite miserable about and quite opposed to the flag and quite opposed to the monarchy, quite opposed to the Jubilee stuff. And I come from the left, so I should be opposed to it all. I like according to what the left are into, but I'm not. I've never really given a shit about the monarchy really, but I would be sad to see it go because it is an ingrained part of our country. And I know it's absurd that these people live in obscure wealth for no reason other than we've decided that they're king and queen and all that stuff. But I don't know, there's something about it that I don't think people realise that if we got rid of, let's say, for example, sorry, I'm going off on one, but let's say, for example, we get rid of the monarchy. I don't think people have thought further than that. I don't think they are thinking about, well, what do we do after that? How do we replace it? How do we replace the structure?
Right. I'm trying to remember it, but it was something on Mark Stein's show on GB News, or it was a quote saying that the monarchy has, done well for Britain and the Commonwealth in just that it's somebody to diminish the politicians that you have in America, where
in theory,
Biden
that's the
has
idea.
Right, that Biden has a massive motorcade and Nancy Pelosi hasn't seen a constituents in years, and they act very kingly and queenly and in a very don't touch me way. And whereas, the Queen of England and other people of the royal family, it's like that they are something above the politicians, so politicians can't get too uppity, but also it's their job to meet with the common people and to
Well,
talk.
yeah, because they're supposed to serve the people, right? So they're supposed to serve us. And I quite like that idea. And like you said, it is so that in theory, the Queen can overrule the Parliament, but she hasn't overruled them so far on any of this mad gender shit. So, but I think the monarchy actually in the UK are getting a really hard time because a lot of people are going at them for being racist and for being whatever it is they're being. I don't know what they're doing, but for being maybe for not being left wing enough. But I don't know if the monarchy is supposed to be political in that way, and I've never seen them as political. So to have them have some sort of pressure put on them to align themselves politically, I think that's wrong.
Right. And, with Prince Charles, who is more political than everyone else, is like, that is not your job, buddy.
People don't like it.
Mhm.
People don't like it. But then you've got Harry and Meghan, haven't you? They fucked off. They're not royals anymore, apparently. But we still talk about them as if they are. And so they're very political, aren't they? They're very left wing.
Yeah.
They're very radical, I would say.
Yeah, they are. I don't know. I don't think people here like them that much either. They're just, well, actually, probably the left wing does, but most people just look at them and they're absurd. They
are absurd. Absurd is a good word for it, because I think Harry was kind of like the rebellious darling. Like, we sort of loved him because he's got that rebellious streak in him, and he kind of like a non-conformist, and I think a lot of people in the UK love that, like the underdog. And but this whole thing they're doing last year, I think it was, on the Oprah Winfrey show, talking about being oppressed or whatever it is, I couldn't listen to it. I couldn't stomach it. I was like, you're not on this planet, but you're saying all of these things that people on the left want you to say. I think they genuinely buy into it, though. I think they're a little bit not reading the room. I think that's the word, isn't it? When you don't read the room, I think they don't read the room. But that's because they live in absurd land.
Yeah.
Absurd lands that, what do you mean I need to actually produce shows for Netflix for them to hand me money? It's crazy.
I forgot about that.
No,
Yeah.
and I heard that during the Platinum Jubilee that it is a thing said among the royals that when you talk to Harry and Meghan, assume that you're being recorded, because that's how they are, that there's no internal family trust there. That whatever
That's horrible. Can you
Just-
imagine that in your own family? Like if
Right.
your cousins or something just went really woke and then suddenly were looking for any way in which they could throw you under the bus to the world.
that you have to watch every word in case that could be taken out of context and then blasted all over Netflix.
That's cancel culture though, isn't it? That is a good way of looking at it. And I think as well, it's quite sad because I wonder if he will regret. I mean, despite whatever family tensions he may have, I mean, we all have disputes with our families and stuff. I wonder if he'll regret all that when he's older. Because I think a lot of people, like these trans activists as well, a lot of them throw their parents under the bus and throw their family under the bus. And I wonder if they'll regret it.
I don't know. I think a lot of them will. I mean, how can you? I mean, you're embracing a whole
Ideology. It's a whole worldview.
You're fulfilling your life with an ideology instead of relationships and people and stuff. At some point in time, you're going to be sad that you missed out on.
And you're going to need your family at some point because, like you said, you're filling your life and giving your life meaning with this ideology. But what I've noticed is that these people, they're looking for allies, right? This is what they always say, allies. They're not looking for friendships and relationships and sincere, honest connections with each other. So they're not going to have any loyalty to each other. And when shit hits the fan, they're all going to split and turn on each other as well, right?
Well, it's been done in the knitting community. They got rid of all the conservative Trump supporters. And so who did they start going after? They went after Sockmatician, who was a gay male that did something that they didn't like. So therefore, they canceled him. They went after another woman who was very prominent because she oppressed Black people. Like you fill yourself with this ideology and then
there's nobody left at the end of it.
You.
Nobody will be left. It's like the people that went after me, they very quickly threw each other under the bus for when I called them out online about me. Very quickly were eager to say it wasn't me that lied about her, it was this person, that person, this person. Just no loyalty whatsoever, none. Just whatever saves me in the moment.
Yeah, and it's something that always, look, I personally think that the best relationships are ones where you can actively disagree with people, and not on everything because that gets tiring, but maybe just because I'm a little argumentative that I'll be like, well, what do you think about this? And then if they take a different opinion, I'm like, all right, let's argue it out. Let's go. And I have a lot of fun with that. And
I do too.
Right. It's kind of like, oh, well, we disagree. Well, let's talk about where we disagree, because when we talk about where we disagree, we can kind of, sort out better what we think about things. Or if you make a good point or I make a good point, or we're both wrong, whatever. Let's have fun. And
I was about to. Oh, I'm so sorry. I interrupted.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Oh no, I was just going to say I'm the same way, and I was going to say the same as you, that in the act of being able to respectfully debate, you can articulate yourself better and you make your arguments more robust and you make your thoughts more complex as well. And there's a lot of things that I debated my friends with that I've over time changed my opinions on, or they've changed their opinion, or even I do things like listen to content that I don't think I'll agree with, like Matt Walsh. I didn't think I'd agree with him. He's like the opposite of everything that I've always been. And I started listening to him probably about a year ago. Like I knew about him in the background, but I started really listening to him about a year ago. There's loads of stuff he's on about that I think is wrong about or whatever. But I listen to him because he articulates himself well, and he doesn't always just say, if you believe this, you're a moron, and that's it, end of conversation. He says, this is what I believe and this is why I believe it, this is where my beliefs come from, this is where I've developed my perception of this issue. And I find it really interesting to understand where people are coming from, because it helps me to engage in the argument a lot better. Does that make sense? Like the abortion thing, he's pro-life, isn't it? Pro-life, that's the word. And I've always been pro-choice, but what I found is that people are calling it pro-abortion now, aren't they? They're not calling it pro-choice. And I'm not sure if I'm pro-abortion. I'm just pro, it's not my thing to tell somebody else what they can do, an adult, what they can do with their body, right? So I don't want to make laws that restrict women from doing what they think's best for them. Whether or not I would personally do it, I don't know. I have complex feelings about it. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
But I wouldn't want to stop somebody else from doing it if they feel that that's what's right for them. And Matt Walsh is very against that. And I found it interesting listening to him. And I'll ask you guys where you stand on it if you want in a minute. But he talks about it like this is a life and murder is wrong. And I thought that was really interesting because I've never thought of it that way. I've always thought of it as in this is a woman's body and she shouldn't be forced by the government to do something to her body she doesn't want to do. And to me, it's about government interfering with what your rights over your body are. But to Matt Walsh, it's a question of whether or not this is murder and whether it's okay to do that. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, and personally, I think it's murder. But like I said earlier, I'm a Christian. In the Bible, it says that God knew you before you were born. He knit you together in your mother's womb. So therefore, since that's what I believe, I don't agree with it. But I think that I might differ from Anne on some things where I don't know what her stance is, but I think that we need more birth control. We need more, because the reality of our world is that people aren't going to abstain until they're married. That's just what is going on here. And so let's make it easier for people to prevent pregnancy in the first place so that it's not an issue later on, I guess, is more of where I am with it. So I don't know.
I'm also pro-life, but my kind of thing, and at the moment of conception, you have your own DNA. You are your own individual being. You are completely unique from that thing. So it's like, over a woman's body, it's like, but it's also the child's body, that it's sort of, I don't know, that it's also their life and their individuality. And that's where I kind of take it like, well, what about them? It's like, well, they're not much at that point, but it's still them. And we were all at that point too, that is sort of their own potential taken away, the own life that they could have had taken away. And even if that life was crap, it was theirs. They had the opportunity to have it. So that's
okay. I'm
right.
going to cause some trouble now. Are you ready?
Okay. Sure.
Right. So when the COVID thing happened and there was a lot of talk about vaccine mandates, were you against it?
Yes.
Okay, me too. And I would say I was against it because I don't think the government should be able to tell us what to put in our body. And that's the same line of thinking I'm using on this. I think it's a slippery slope for the government to tell you what you can and can't do to your body. How do you feel about that?
Well,
because I'll tell you what I think about the murder thing in a minute as well, and whether I think it's a life.
Sure. No, I'd say that, I mean, as far as general government regulations, and also I want to put in there that there's a couple, times, for people talk about medically you have to have abortions, but technically, like times when you have a child growing and like they cannot be carried to term, like that sort of thing, that there's no way that they could survive.
Yeah, that's quite rare as well. That,
yes, it's extremely rare. So just want to take that out. That
I would say that that's outside of the argument, because I don't think anybody would argue that if you can't carry the kids to full term that you should be forced to.
Right. That the government telling you over what you have in your own body, that there are not that you should have to have a medical procedure, but that, murder is the big one, that I'm not allowed to murder another person, that I'm not allowed to steal from another person, that I am not allowed to assault another person, that is, basic government strictures over people, that, that those rights extend to infants or preborn infants, that I don't think is a stretch.
Yeah, and I personally am of the mindset of, you know, if you're choosing to engage in sex, it is a byproduct of it, and you should be aware of what can happen and how birth control can fail, and that's a risk you're willing to take. Like if you want to live a life where you might get pregnant, that's something that you should have to deal with. If you don't want to get pregnant, then you know that,
Right.
I don't know.
And then, I mean, and then of course the argument is in there for incest and rape, which, you know, definitely that this is a horrible and tragic thing. But my argument would still be that it's tragedy upon tragedy. You know, I'm not saying, you know, that a woman may not want to, you know, give up the child for adoption or anything like that, but I'm saying that that child's potential existence is not worth less for having had that be how they came about in this world.
I think it's interesting because you argued that it's about not murdering someone. You're not, the government doesn't allow you to, or you shouldn't murder people and stuff like that. And I think it's interesting that that argument was used around vaccines, saying that if you don't get your vaccine, you're killing people. And I know that was a false argument as well. That wasn't true. Whereas your argument, you could argue there's truth to it. I mean, I don't know exactly yet where I stand on it being murder, because I don't know exactly yet where I think the point is that I would say that's a human life that has as much right to be here as the mother.
Yeah.
You'll probably disagree with that, but that's fine. But I still need to think about that part of it as well, if that makes sense.
No,
Absolutely.
totally. And that is something that I've heard with a lot of other people when they debate out abortion, that a lot of people, when they say I'm pro-choice, that they'll, I think it was Steven Crowder who did this. He got out a fetal chart and he's like, okay, so at what point in the pregnancy do you think that there shouldn't be abortion? Do you think you should be abortion up to 9 months? Do you think 8 months? You know, if you have a preemie baby at 7 months, they're okay. So do you think that there should be no abortions after that point, or do you think before? And that's sort of a debate out of, okay, so what if you think that, yes, there should be abortions, but you can only have abortions in a 2-month time period? Okay, that debate is different from, okay, up to 9 months, you're good. That there are levels of the.
Yeah, and I think like politically, there's overestimations on both sides. And if we just say both sides for now, left and right.
Right.
So I think on the right, people overestimate how much this is just being used as like a casual contraceptive carelessly, or that women are just rocking up to the abortion clinic 8 months pregnant, just going, I've changed my mind. I think there's an overestimation of that. And then on the left, there's an overestimation of the terrible things that can happen. Like there's medical reasons you can't have the baby anymore, or that something awful has happened to you and you're now pregnant. I think that's overestimated, and we're trying to make decisions based on both extremes, if that makes sense. And I think the law should go somewhere in the middle. I think this argument you said about Steven Crowder putting up the chart and saying, well, at which point, I think that's a good argument to have. I think that's a good starting place, because no matter what we do, there are going to be people that think it's murder no matter what and you shouldn't do it. And there are going to be people that think the woman's right over her body is the most important. And I don't think those two people are going to meet in the middle by themselves.
Right. But so where do you think, okay, a woman has the choice to do whatever with her body. Does she have the choice to do it up till the baby is full term? You know, like,
I think I wouldn't do it. I think that is rough as fuck, because that is a full-grown baby at that point and you've had 9 months to think about it. I think obviously, like we said, in the event of something terrible happening to you, either medically you can't carry it anymore, or the things like stillbirths and stuff. Sorry, did I click off just then? Sorry. Yeah, there's things that can happen that need to be taken into account. But if this is just a case of somebody's changed their mind and doesn't want it anymore. I don't approve of that. I
Right.
can't. I don't understand it. I don't understand why you would carry a baby for that long and then get rid of it.
I mean,
But I also think it's quite rare for people to do it at that stage as well.
I don't know the statistics on late term abortions, but I know as a mother who has carried 2 kids that it didn't feel real to me until they started moving, until I could feel them. But once I could feel them, didn't matter how big they were. Once I could feel them in there, there was no doubt that that was a kid in my belly. Like that's just, and so I think as a person who's had kids, I just don't understand because I felt it.
Yeah.
I felt that baby moving around, and I don't know how you could decide that that's okay. I'm good. I'm gonna, like, and I'm being flip about it. I don't think that people are flip about it. I just
no. But I have known people in my personal life that I've bit my tongue around because they have had multiple abortions and treated it as a contraceptive, and I don't agree.
Mm-hmm.
So
I certainly don't. That's one thing that I think is messed up, because there are people that use it as a form of birth control, which is why I think that no matter what, people should understand the consequences of having sex and be educated, because it's not a form of birth control and it shouldn't be treated as such no matter what.
Yeah, I agree with
that
that part.
I think that there's issues with the way adoptions are done too. They're so terribly expensive. Yeah. Whereas, maybe there's a way to fix the adoption industry so that people who don't want to have their babies, it's easier for everybody involved, So yeah. I think that there's a lot of things around the conversation too that a lot of things need to be fixed.
I didn't mean to derail into this argument.
No, but
it was interesting though.
But I'm glad you did, because it's a good example of, we like having you on, we love talking to you, and we're not the same, and that's okay. Yeah. And I'm pleased that we can talk about it, and I don't have to agree with what you say, and you don't have to agree with me. And
no,
like I said,
fine.
I think Anne and I don't even see quite eye to eye on the whole issue, and that's okay. That's how it should be.
Yeah, it is.
And back to our original topic of the transgender people, people are like, oh, you hate transgender people. I don't. If somebody chooses to be
I don't
trans,
hate anybody.
That's their choice. And we need to stop painting people with this big brush, like, oh, because you didn't fly a pride flag, you hate gay people. No, I just don't personally agree with the pride ideology, and I'm not going to fly a flag. And I think that that's where we need to get as a society. It's got to stop being this all or nothing. You are totally for this or you're totally against it. Like, life is all shades of gray, and that's what we need to start getting at again.
Right. And I mean, so you have the intersectionality flag, or which I know I saw, it was a cutesy little drawn chart of all the different pride flags, and I've always known it as the intersectionality flag because it has the triangle.
That's what it is.
Trans, and the that you also have the black and brown stripes. I'm like, okay. And
yeah, because your skin color apparently is something to do with your sexuality and your gender identity.
Right.
Thing.
Right. And they always try to add more things to it. I'm like, please stop. But that a lot of people would be like, oh, well, you don't like this flag, you think this flag is, pushing an ideology, then it goes straight from that to, but this is trans people's right to live. I'm like, hang on, I'm not saying you don't have a right to live, and I'm not saying that you don't have a right to make your own choices for
they
whatever.
Didn't have a right to live, they wouldn't be here.
Right.
They wouldn't be on every corporation all month in both the UK and in America if they did not have the right to live. Mm-hmm. And also, I have to say as well, my battery's going to run out soon, so I'm really sorry. I didn't charge up enough
anyway. Oh no! Because we've been on for like an hour and a half, so it's okay.
Oh shit! I can talk to you guys for ages. This is really interesting.
Well, that's the whole point. We see eye to eye on some of it and not on others, and I'm glad that we have the opportunity to talk about it. And I'm glad that we don't all have to think the same way. That's how it is supposed to be in our countries. We are not all supposed to be in lockstep. This is not Nazi Germany, but if the left had their way, it would be.
No, there's an old phrase from a short story. It's "shut up," they explained. It's like, that's not an explanation.
That's so good.
Shut up. And I don't know, I feel like that's a lot of things in conversations that's like, no, wait, we can actually explain. We don't need to just quiet each other. We can just talk about it normally.
Yeah, but we have gone way over today. So guys, thanks so much, Birdy Rose, for joining us.
That's all right.
If you guys haven't checked out the Famous Artist Birdy Rose, she's got some cool stuff. She's got her new Female to the Bone merch.
There you go. Female to the bone, and no one is born in the wrong body.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you have different like
Oh.
athletic wear too.
Yeah, and I've got Mal to the Bone for the Parental Willy Wearers Day coming up this weekend.
For what?
Parental Willy Wearers Day, you know, what traditionally used to be called men or fathers.
Oh. I got you now, sorry. Yeah, so if you need a Father's Day gift, check out her shop. It won't make it there because this is Saturday, but you know, it'll come later. It'll be good. And don't forget to check out our sponsor, Chicken Lady Fiber Arts. You can get some of her awesome yarn. This is a one of a kind skein that you'll get from me at some point. But if you want to find something special for yourself, use the code PIK Flag Day 20 for 20% off. And check her out. Check out our buddy Cody. If you want something that's not woke and it's just a fun story, Odyssey Tale. And Birdy Rose.
Yes,
sorry.
Remind you again, we have our giveaway. Comment below to win this lovely yarn and a copy of the book. And again, this was our prize last week, designer Cheryl. Please get in contact with us. And this is the Politically Incorrect Knitters colorway. So check that out from Chicken Lady.
Yes. So Birdy Rose, thank you so much. Where should people look for you?
The Famous Artist BirdyRose.com.
Awesome. 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 Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys next week.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
See you later.